All right, we'll get started. The question we're going to answer today is a question that people ask, and then everyone sort of, you get that the jazz hands move, and no one really answers it. And the question is, what stops us from scaling all of these Gen AI programs that we see with our clients? My name is Naveen Sharma. I run the data and analytics business at Cognizant, joined with Ryan from Databricks, and we're both going to tag team a little bit. We'll show you what's happening, what we think needs to happen for enterprises to rewire themselves, and really take advantage of all the capabilities that Gen AI brings. Now, let's start with what triggers adoption, right? And adoption's a push-pull thing. You have to have things that are problematic enough that someone wants to change behavior. You have to have pull from the future. The alternate solution to what you have has to be attractive, has to say, wow, this is interesting, given the problems I have today, and the promise of the future, I'm going to go towards it. What stops adoption is inertia. Well, what I do today works fine, right? Why change something? I don't know if this thing's going to be around for too long, so that's the uncertainty of the future. That balance is where adoption hangs. What we've seen is adoption happens when the top part, the promise, the positive, is greater than the negatives, the inertia. This is something that is fundamentally important to frame this whole Gen AI conversation within our own respective firms. The problems that Gen AI solves today, they're meaningful, but they're not crunchy enough. They're not powerful enough that companies can go, yes, I want to reorient, I'm going to do everything possible to change how I do business, and that's going to become my default. So this is where we are today. It's just not solving crunchy enough problems for enterprises to adopt it at scale. The good thing is, this is not the first time we've seen this, and you can see what's gone on. For those of us that have been around for a while, the internet started off in the 70s. The first 20, 25 years of the internet was academics emailing each other, pure text emails, people using it for very, very narrow purposes. They didn't really take off for 25 years. Something that we cannot live without for 25 minutes sat there for 25 years. Look at the world of digital. The internet became commonplace in the late 90s, right? The dot-com boom, all of the money that was going in, all of that was in place. But enterprises didn't really start to put big dollars into it until 2010-ish. That's when commerce took off. That's when the whole SMAC stack, what we used to call the social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, all came together. And that really uplifted what enterprises were doing with the internet. Generative AI is going to go down that same path. AI has been around since the 50s. One of my favorite trivia things that I'll love sharing with people, the actual architecture for the transformer model was detailed out in 1943. Think about that, right? The math behind the transformer model, there's papers from 1943 that detail that out. Doesn't matter, we're not going to say AI was around in 1943, but work on AI has been going on since the 50s. Now we're at this wave where Gen AI is prevalent, and it's going to solve all the business needs that we have for our businesses today, right? That's the easy answer. I disagree with that. I don't think Gen AI is going to solve the problems that we have today. And we'll talk a little bit about what it will solve for you. Now, I've already made this point, right? Companies need to give technology space to mature. Another example that I like to use is think of where the PC was when it first came into the enterprise, right? So the early 80s, PCs became prevalent. Personal computers were prevalent within the enterprise. Everyone was running Excel spreadsheets or whatever the precursor to Excel was back in the day, Lotus or whatever else. You had Word documents that you were editing or doing things of that nature. So they were present, but were they really impactful? Maybe not so much. That's the framing that I think we need to start thinking about as we go through with this. Much like the PC started off being a productivity assistant, Gen AI is also going to start down that path. It'll become the productivity assistant that all of us need, that all of us use in our day-to-day tasks. So that's the first thing that I want you to walk away with. Two, it will be as impactful. Think of our enterprises today. There really is no function that works without a connected computer. That's where this is going to land as well. All of this is good, right? But then why is the adoption so slow? I saw one of the more positive notes in the keynote this morning, right? When Ali said 85% of those use cases that companies have deployed with Gen AI do not make it to production. What he's saying is 15% do. I think that is still a little bit more on the aggressive side. We've run somewhere around 500 different Gen AI projects, POCs, programs. They're essentially all experiments aimed at proving out the value of Gen AI. Now, the good part, we've yet to see a single Gen AI project fail. These experiments are all successful. So now we're at the point where we're saying, look, when a client comes in and says they want to try something out with Gen AI, first thing we tell them is, you've got an N of 500. The 501st and the 502nd and the 503rd experiment is not going to give you different results. So what you need to start doing is step back and think about what you're trying to really build and stop focusing on the experiment part. That's the first thing I leave them with. The second thing that I leave them with is, if you just focus on technology and building that algorithm, right? It's like listening to a single music note over and over again. Those 500 instances, I'm playing the same note over and over again. And if I keep doing that, it's going to get into the definition of torture. And we don't want to do that to anyone. But it is that where we're at. Where we think this will go, where we think this turns away from being a binary of algorithms and proving out these, is when you bring different things together. And there's 5 different themes that I want to call out here. The first part is data. Now, data is something, we're at a data and AI conference, right? So all of you inherently get the value of data. All of you understand how data is critical and how the underlying data infrastructure is critical to actually get value out of AI. Ryan's going to talk a little bit about it, but you've just walked out of a keynote where this point was driven home. Data is the first step. If you don't have this right, you're not going to get a whole lot of value out of any investment in the enterprise unless you get the data right. The next part is the process. Now, this is something I think companies haven't done enough in. If you look at all these experiments that are being run today, they take existing processes and they try and improve that process productivity by a few percentage points. That's not big picture thinking, that's not bold thinking, that's incremental thinking. If you're going to try and get meaningful value out of everything that's happened with Gen AI, the process part has to be re-engineered as well. Until you do that, the gains are going to be minuscule, the gains are going to be impressive, because the technology is impressive, but it's not going to change your business in any meaningful way. The third part is technology. This is a multimodal tool set that we have. It's not just text, it's not just sound, it's not just video, it's a combination of everything. You saw some of the demos from the lab at Stanford, Fei Lee's, Dr. Lee's demos of the robotic arm, right? Those are all of the things that the technology allows us to do. I think you have to bring all of them together and start to really fundamentally rethink your business activity to drive impact. The fourth one is human. And when I say human, I'm not thinking of it as a human in the loop. Actually, let me just quickly build to the next one. I think the human and the culture part go together. The human is needed to start asking the question of how should things be, as opposed to what can I do, what's in place today, and tweak it. It's if I was to start whatever business you're in today, how would I imagine it? Would I go back to the things that I do today? Or am I building out the business of tomorrow with fundamentally different building blocks? The ability to reimagine that and think of, how should things be is important. That's where the human and the culture part come in. So once you have all 5 of these, I think now you're well on your way to success. But as with any orchestra, the missing piece is the conductor. Here, this is cute. The conductor is where we come in, right? So this is what we want to talk about. The fact that we can bring this together between our 2 companies, what we do at Cognizant, we bring all of those things, plus an understanding of your business, the context, the problems that you're trying to solve, other places we've solved it. Databricks brings in the platform, the technology capabilities, everything that we saw in the last couple of hours. Layering them together is the way to actually drive meaningful change for your respective business organizations. This is who we are specifically on the Databricks side, right? So doing work for several dozen clients, you can see the number of associates that we've been working with on and trained on, all of that, awards and recognition. You walk into any of these sessions, I guarantee you're going to see a similar slide. What makes us different, though, is the fact that we're able to take the work that's been done, package it for repeatability. Repeatability helps our clients, right? Repeatability means you have lower cost, lower risk, and faster time to market. That's the real reason behind repeatability for us. That's why we bring these things together. So I'll hand it over to you, Ryan. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about some of the work we've done.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think your previous slide talked about the human and the culture aspect, and Databricks as a platform, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about some of the customers that Databricks and Cognizant have worked on together, but that piece of it is so critically important, as you point out, and our partnership with Cognizant is what really drives success. It's one thing to give someone a platform and people start building, but these are long projects. They take years and years, to really build this stuff out. And Cognizant has been a fantastic partner. The last time I checked, I think they have over 2,500 2,500 users who are certified on the platform, and then another 600 who are badged, which is a more difficult certification to get. And so, without partners like you, these projects, people always say people process technology, right? We need the people part, and that's where Cognizant has been so helpful. So at a high level, some of the customers that Cognizant and Databricks work at together, they really do span all industries. My role at Databricks is actually to work with our solution architecture team in the healthcare space. And we have a lot of great partnerships. I'm going to highlight one on the next slide. But across industry, Cognizant has been a phenomenal partner in helping build and deploy these types of projects on Databricks. And Naveen called out how generative AI, it's getting there. We're doing these experiments, but the foundation needs to be built, as he said. And that's what a lot of these examples are. We have worked very closely in retail, in manufacturing, in healthcare and life sciences. A good retail example is a pharmacy and convenience store, and it's a personalization story. So they really wanted to be able to better connect directly to the consumers, both to help those consumers have a better pharmacy experience, but then also be working on the cross-selling and the upselling around the rest of the things that they could get to grow the basket size at the point of sale, right? From a healthcare perspective, both payers, providers, insurance companies, there's all kinds of various use cases that, from fraud, waste, and abuse, and helping reduce the amount of fraudulent claims that hit both property and casualty, but also health insurers, to care providers who are now really embracing data and finding ways to deliver better health outcomes to people. But manufacturing, supply chain use cases, right? Demand forecasting, all these things are things that Cognizant has helped these companies build on the Databricks Lakehouse platform. And I think the point I would want to leave you all with is that, as we said, Gen AI is here and it's going to evolve, but it's going to take some time, as Naveen pointed out. The data is the absolute foundation, and the belief at Databricks is that the Lakehouse is the place where you want to get all that data into a single place, curate it, govern it, make sure it's appropriately ready for use, and then that is what's really going to be the engine that helps power this wave of transformation with generative AI, as Naveen points out. So let me dive in just a little bit deeper to a specific architecture. So this is a big academic healthcare provider in the Northeast, and this is a customer we're working on actively right now with Cognizant. And they have started their transformation journey into the cloud. They're modernizing their systems and moving all their data into the cloud. We are setting up, a couple of the points of the architecture I would want to call out. First, we have to get that data in and build that lakehouse, hydrate that lakehouse. Again, that data is the foundation. So number one, we've got a bunch of batch pipelines that need to be engineered. And this is where Cognizant is a huge help, because we have to plug into things like Epic. Anybody here who's ever worked with Epic, it's not the most straightforward thing. Anybody who's ever worked with any kind of ERP system, they're not the most straightforward thing. So you have to get that data in and get it into the lakehouse, into that raw layer, but then transform it into a more curated and usable layer. That's all kind of that ingest and store level. But in healthcare as well, there's a lot of streaming data. So when a patient has an experience, a HL7 or fire record is often generated, and the more real-time that those pieces of data can get also ingested into the lakehouse becomes very important, right? So Cognizant's helping us build not just batch pipelines, but also streaming real-time pipelines to make sure that this data that's in the lakehouse is about as state-of-the-art as it can be in terms of recency. Then we put it all into the lakehouse where we have both a governance layer, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about Unity Catalog over the last couple of years. We announced the open source today, but that's critical. And it's critical to have security and governance, not just for the data, but for everything that lives in that lakehouse, which will include these types of models that are produced from the generative AI, from the LLMs that you might be building or from the foundational models that you might be tuning, however you're doing these experiments. All of that data, it's critical, and Unity is really about thinking about how to govern all those data assets holistically. Now that we're opening it up, working with something like Calibra, which at this particular customer they use, that becomes important to give them not just lineage and linkage, just what's happening in the lakehouse, but as those data assets move outside of the lakehouse into BI tools or what have you, or from further upstream. All that is stored in a lakehouse on Delta Lake, and it's all orchestrated with Databricks workflows. Then we are using various components for that consumption of that, both Databricks SQL to do the more traditional warehouse row and column data, but we're also then running some Spark jobs and some of the ML training. And this is, now that we have that foundation built, this is where we can enable that AI and that Gen AI, these use cases. So we're gonna do all the basic BI work, and that stuff's all pretty straightforward. Cognizant has great tool sets, by the way, to help migrate. I mean, a lot of this foundation of a lakehouse build will come from data that's been in Teradata, or data that's been in Exadata, or data that's been in SQL Server, right? So all of that, building that foundation, and that's what allows you to get to that, all the far right here, the model serving, the real-time LLM, the inference, all of that stuff. And this customer is indeed looking at LLMs for clinical research. They're looking at LLMs for internal use cases in terms of just automating processes between, say, a patient comes in and gets a biopsy, and then a pathology order is generated from that. And LLMs can actually have those conversations and automate some of that. And again, a lot of experiments, as you pointed out, but it's coming. So we couldn't do it without partners like Cognizant, and I don't think our customers could either. So we thank Cognizant, and I'm gonna throw it back to you to kind of close us out here.
Thank you, Ryan. So to remind everyone, remember that slide with the conductor and the orchestra? The first layer was data. And this is what I mean, right? Having that data foundation right, and something that you can build upon is key. We think that's what the platform brings. That's what we want to do with our clients. To summarize, how do we help our clients go down this journey? There's a couple of different layers to this, right? So you can see there. One, we spoke about this. You have to rethink how you do things. If you're just going to make incremental tweaks, you're going to get incremental results. So reimagining that process is key. And the thing that I would like you to take away with, right, is the experiments are done 500 times. You've seen the results. Now we have to start thinking about scaling. So please think of that as you evaluate where you go into this. The second thing in here is that this is not, we're not here to say, well, we're gonna make sure Gen AI gets deployed here. We're all here because our businesses are profitable or on the path to that sort of profit. You have to start with that business first mindset. If you start with the Gen AI first mindset, you're going to get relegated to the list of experiment creators. So make sure you start with that business first mindset. Make sure you think about how you're gonna scale it. I think that's going to help you get buy-in. Number two, you have to rethink your technology architecture, right? And some of that may be just redesigning, some of that may be taking what you have in place. We're not saying rip and replace everything out and you'll have nirvana. That's not true. Some things will be reusable. You have to pick and choose what works. The second box in there talks about the need to get data right. The good thing, and we've seen this for the last 10 plus years, right? Once data expanded into the world of big data, and now even more importantly, the world of scale with Gen AI models are trained, the need to get specific data rows right for training became smaller and smaller. I'm not advocating by any means to go with garbage data and it's all going to be good, but you don't have to worry about perfection. Getting data to that 80 to 90% acceptable use is good enough. Don't spend the rest of the money and time trying to get the 1% or the 2% of the data that's not clean enough, right? Third thing I'll call out, the need to orchestrate Gen AI, right? You saw some of that today. There was talk of compound models. I'm not at that place yet. I'm not talking about compound models. That's a net new idea for me as well. But impact will come when you layer in Gen AI to existing processes. Some of those are deterministic. Some of those may be as simple as SQL code that lives in a stored procedure somewhere. That's okay. That's the world that all of us live in. The need to get value is key. And that's going to come if you start orchestrating what you have in the enterprise along with the net new capabilities that you have. So that's the second piece of this. And the third and the final tower is the business process. I spoke about this already, right? The minute you get into that, this is not a popular opinion, but I'm going to share it, that Six Sigma inspired thinking of, I'm going to improve processes incrementally, your goal is small. So there is room, there's absolutely a place under the sun for doing that sort of thinking. But if you're trying to get impact, you have to really start rethinking your business process, because otherwise the value gains are not going to be important enough. You do have to start thinking about your people. There's a lot of energy and interest in learning these new technologies. For those of us that don't live day in and day out in the world of technology, there's also a little bit of fear on what is this going to do to our jobs, our collective jobs. So this is something that, ignoring it is absolutely the worst thing you can do. Acknowledge that fear exists within the enterprise. Start thinking about how you retrain those folks, how you get them more comfortable with these tools. I think that's going to be important. And that layers into that change management part. So all of those are things that, obviously, we bring to the table, we help our clients get ready with, and I just wanted to leave that with you. All right, thank you.